More breaking news from Zimmerman Juror B29. The woman we now know as Maddie. For the first time ever, we're hearing and seeing her take on the trial. Here's part of that explosive interview with ABC News.
What was your first vote?
My first vote was second-degree murder.
Second-degree murder.
In between that 9 hours, it was hard. A lot of us that wanted to find something bad, something that we could connect to the law. For myself, he's guilty because the evidence shows he's guilty.
He's guilty of?
Killing Trayvon Martin. But as the law was read to me, if you have no proof that he killed him intentionally, you can't say he's guilty.
Did you want to step out at all? Did you want to
I was
quit?
the juror that was going to give him the hung jury. Oh, I was. I fought to the end. I mean, it's hard for me to sleep. It's hard for me to eat because I feel that I was forcibly included in Trayvon Martin's death. And as I carry him on my back, I'm hurting as much as Trayvon Martin's mom is. Because there's no way that any mother should feel that pain.
Guilty of killing Trayvon Martin. Wow. Back with me now is Seema Iyer and Ken Padowitz. I'm also joined by veteran prosecutor Paul Henderson. Thank you all for joining me.
Thanks for having us.
Paul, what's your reaction to hearing Juror B29, Maddie, talk about the pain of Trayvon Martin's family?
You know, I think that's exactly what the prosecution wanted to impart to this jury. They wanted them in that jury room to feel for and identify with Trayvon Martin's parents. And so when I hear her saying that she wanted to identify with them, she feels that pain, she wanted to find him guilty, and she didn't know how to get to guilty given the legal standards that she was given in Florida law. It really highlights to me, I think, some of the shortcomings in the presentation from the prosecution, because that's your job as a prosecutor, is to give them that roadmap, to give them those signs, and give them the tools in that jury room so that they can get to the verdict that you want them to reach. And so it's very frustrating, I think, certainly for them, to hear that that's what she wanted to do and did not feel that she had the tools to fight back with the other jurors or even to hold on to those convictions for herself for the entire verdict. So,
Seema, she clearly says that as the law was read to me, which the prosecutor is clearly in there somewhere, and the law is in there somewhere, and she said, again, it had to be intentional, which is not true.
But she says that, the statement that you just said, after she said in this interview the words guilty and the word evidence. So I certainly don't understand how my friend Paul reconciles that. Because even though I understand what you're saying that the law is the problem here, the way the jury instructions were read. But before you get to that, Rev, this juror is telling us that she found him guilty, that there is evidence, and that she now feels guilty for finding a contrary verdict.
No, but I think she's saying that the evidence was that he killed and that she felt he was guilty, but as the law was read, she couldn't find that. That's how I understand what she's saying.
But she's not saying the words, those key words of justification. She's not talking about self-defense. And I'm sure Paul heard this too. When she says the word intentional, the act itself was intentional.
But I think, Ken, I think that's where you and had said earlier that the prosecutor didn't make that clear.
I did say that. And I think
that's what's lacking here.
That is what was lacking here, because I think there was evidence, and it could be interpreted in two different ways. And obviously, at the end of the day, this jury chose to interpret the evidence that was presented to them in a way that supported Zimmerman's presentation. But there was another way to interpret that same evidence and to see conflicts in that evidence that they could have gotten to a verdict of guilty. She's saying that's what she wanted to do. That's what she believed she had, but she did not have a clear enough tool. Yeah, and I think that's the gap. I mean, that's where we missed out.
Ken, what happens in the jury room? Tell me, go in the jury room and tell me what could have been the pressuring inside the jury room.
Well, inside that jury room, the strongest personalities are going to end up being the leaders of the jury. And so the other lesser personalities that are not as strong, they need to have the ammunition, the tools, as was stated before, the tools to be able to tell the rest of the jury, this person is guilty. Here's the evidence. Here's why this person is guilty. And that's why I said that the prosecutor's closing argument, the second argument, was brilliant emotionally. But what it lacked was, it didn't show the jury how to apply the law step by step to each piece of fact in this case. And that was what happening back in that jury room. This juror didn't have the tools to fight off those other jurors and make it clear that the law does support a conviction here based on the evidence that's in this trial.
Now, Maddie's talked about how she feels about her decision now. Listen to this.
I stand by the decision because of the law. If I stand by the decision because of my heart, he would have been guilty.
I know that you've heard some people have said, point blank, they've said George Zimmerman got away with murder. How do you respond to those people who say that?
George Zimmerman, George Zimmerman got away with murder. But you can't get away from God. And at the end of the day, he's going to have a lot of questions and answers he has to deal with. The law couldn't prove it, but, you know, the world goes in circles.
Seema.
Shame on Maddie. Maddie, shame on you. How dare you invoke God and the Lord to us God-fearing people when the law was there, the evidence was on your side. Reverend Al, shame on her.
Maybe she didn't understand the law. Maybe the way the law was interpreted. I think where I disagree is that you act as though she's a lawyer.
Right, and the law is really complicated, and I think this is not something that is uncommon. When you talk to jurors, they frequently say, you know what, I just didn't understand. It really is the obligation of us lawyers when we are in trial. The last thing that you want to leave those jurors with is a tool to interpret the jury instructions that they have in order to get to the verdict that you want them to achieve. And here she's saying she wanted it, she just didn't know how to achieve it.
Paul,
and so that's a real shortcoming.
That's exactly right, Reverend. And it's not shame on the juror. This is our system of justice. It's not shame on the juror. She was a juror in this case, and we need to respect the verdict. But we can take a look to learn for the future about what some of the problems were here or what some of the failings were. And it's not a failure of this juror. It's a failure of the law. The law is confusing. The stand your ground law is confusing and should be revoked.
Ken, if we respect the verdict, then we don't change the law, then we remain as compliant as everyone else. And Paul, I just want to say that I do concede with you, and Paul and I have spent many hours together here at MSNBC. And Paul, I do want to concede that in both of the prosecution as well as the defense attorney's closing arguments, they did not bring up manslaughter enough. So with that, and Reverend Al,
they did not bring up that you can fight and hold out. And I think where they could have done was ask for more clarity on the law. But I don't blame her for not understanding something that was not explained. And I differ with those that say you can respect the verdict but not, and also change the law. You respect that they made a decision on the law the way it is. But I think the way the law is needs to be changed and clarified. That's where I think my view is.
Well, that's why we have you, Reverend Al, because you are organizing.
That's why we have you, because you can fight it back.
We have to use this as a teaching point and changing point.
Well, that's why we have the lawyers. This juror helped bring us way down the road in that teaching point. Seema, Ken, and Paul, thank you for your time this evening.
Well, other top story tonight is George Zimmerman, quote, got away with murder. At least that's what juror B29 says she believes. Despite the fact, and I want to emphasize this, she did vote to acquit Zimmerman in the shooting death of Trayvon Martin. The only minority juror on the all-female panel is speaking out for the first time. Here's what she's just told ABC News.
George Zimmerman, George Zimmerman got away with murder. But you can't get away from God. And at the end of the day, he's going to have a lot of questions and answers he has to deal with. The law couldn't prove it, but, you know, the world goes in circles.
So how does the Martin family feel about this? And did George Zimmerman's team worry that this one juror could put their client away? Natalie Jackson is an attorney for Trayvon Martin's family. Robert Hirschhorn was the jury consultant for George Zimmerman's defense team. All right, it's great to see both of you again on the show. And Natalie, let me start with you. She says, you heard her, she owes the Martin family an apology. What's your reaction, Natalie?
Well, my reaction is that I feel for her, I do. And I know that she issued an apology to Sabrina Fulton, and I think that's between her and Sabrina to talk about, really. I have not spoken to Sabrina about that. But you know, it's her decision, and she has to live with that.
Well, Robert, let me tell you what we know about this juror. And obviously, I want to emphasize, she did choose to show her face, but obviously she's going by, quote unquote, Maddie, not giving her full name because she's worried about possible retribution. Now, Natalie, from your position, do you wish the jury, the prosecution had gone for a lesser charge to begin with, that they stretched too far? They should have maybe gone for manslaughter, and they could have gotten that.
Listen to what she said. She said that the evidence was there to prove that he's guilty. She believed that he was guilty. The jury instruction says that you can use your common sense. I think she was confused, and that's what I hear from her.
So you think she was confused as to what the law said?
It sounds that way from what I hear. Now, I only have heard that portion that you've played for me, but for what you played, when she says that the evidence proved that he was guilty, that pretty much seems that she's confused about what the law says.
Right. I mean, it's unclear. She says he's guilty of killing Trayvon Martin, which, of course, he doesn't dispute. But she's saying there was no proof that he killed him intentionally. Obviously, Robert, that could be the nuance here. But to Natalie's point, it's unclear exactly what she's saying.
But the evidence wasn't there, and that's what she based her decision on.
Well, Robert, she said the evidence was there, though. That's what I don't understand.
Well,
so
she said for killing him, but she said not intentionally.
For killing, not for murder. Right. And that was undisputed.
Well, murder, too, is not intentional. Well, murder, too, is not intentional. The jury instruction says so. So that's why I believe she's confused.
Well, Natalie, let me ask you, she was the only minority on this panel, right? And that surprised a lot of people, that there was only one minority, and it was Maddie. She told ABC News, though, actually something that completely fits with what the juror who actually seemed to think George Zimmerman was innocent from the beginning had said, which was that the case wasn't about race. She said to Robin, this case was never about race to her. Are you surprised about that?
No, I'm not surprised about that. I think the prosecution, the defense, everyone's told them that it was not about race. But just because you say that it's not about race does not make it true.
All right. Thanks very much.
But the juror heard all the evidence, and now we have two jurors that reached that same conclusion. The case wasn't about race.
Well, you have America who has reached that it was not. It was about race. The jurors got picked because of race, Robert. I mean, a lot of people got excluded because of race, being jurors, because they thought that Trayvon Martin should have been arrested in the first place.
You're saying, Robert, you didn't exclude anyone because of their race?
The idea is we just wanted jurors that could hear all the evidence and decide whether or not George was acting in self-defense.
Be truthful. There was a questionnaire that asked people about whether or not they participated in the protest to get George arrested. And that excluded a lot of black people.
Absolutely not true.
So
was not on the questionnaire. That's absolutely once again,
true. There were questions absolutely true.
I've got the questionnaire right in front of me.
I'm talking, Robert, there were no questions about the...
It's right here.
Robert, were there questions asked? Were there questions asked about whether or not people participated in the protest?
Of course, there were questions asked about the protest, what you'd heard about the case, what opinion you've drawn.
Yes.
Absolutely. That has nothing to do with race. It's an issue that came up in the case.
Many black people were excluded because of that, Robert. I'm just saying.
That's not true.
If we're going to discuss this, let's... Okay, Robert.
All right, well, I'll merely hit pause there, but I thank both of you for taking the time and a conversation that I think a lot of people at home are having, too.